Bonjour tout le monde, ça va bien? Before I begin, on a personal note, I would like to take an opportunity to say happy anniversary to my wife if she's watching. We will hopefully make it to our flight on time so we can celebrate dinner this evening. Sarah, love you. It's been a wonderful 16 years. Good day, everyone. Earlier today, I tabled a bill in the House of Commons to help protect Canadians against hate. One of the great promises of Canada is the ability of our citizens to live freely in their communities, regardless of the color of their skin, the God they pray to, or the person that they love. Sadly, too many Canadians are robbed of these freedoms that so many of us take for granted. Frankly, the prevalence of hate crimes in this country that steal those freedoms are something that should shock the conscience of every Canadian. It is disheartening when you read the news and see day after day stories about yet another victim suffering suffering a hate crime at the hands of someone who is not simply conducting a criminal activity, but who's motivated by their hatred towards an entire group of people. Alors, ce matin, j'ai déposé un projet de loi dans la Chambre des communes pour lutter de la haine partout notre pays. Une grande promesse du Canada et pour assurer chaque Canadien à l'habilité de vivre leur vie avec liberté, sans un problème avec de la haine. Malheureusement, c'est très difficile pour des personnes qui viennent de la communauté en situation minoritaire d'avoir la liberté quand il y a des crimes de la haine. I think to myself about the many examples that we've seen over the years. Not too long ago in my community, we've seen charges laid for someone advocating genocide against their Jewish neighbors. We have seen recently synagogues in Halifax vandalized with hate symbols. We have seen violent attacks against people in Montreal because they are Jewish. We have seen the desecration of the National Holocaust Memorial. We have seen Muslim Canadians suffer discrimination for many years. We have seen, again, not far removed from my home, harassment of those seeking to attend a mosque which only recently opened in the community. We have seen shootings in Quebec cities and van attacks in London that have claimed the lives of innocent people. Sadly, there is no community that is immune from hate in this country. There are violent attacks against Black Canadians, rising anti-Asian hate. We see gurdwaras and mandirs vandalized, and the LGBTQ2+ community threatened with and suffering violence all too often. We are moving forward with a piece of legislation that will create 4 new criminal offences. The first 2 are aimed at protecting religious institutions with the new crimes of obstruction and intimidation. This will ensure those who gather to practice their faith at religious institutions, schools, community centres, and other buildings and structures that primarily serve identifiable communities will have the ability to do so freely and without fear that they will be targeted because of who they are. We also have realized through many conversations with those impacted by hate crimes in Canada that hate is not limited to the doorsteps of our religious institutions, but is prevalent throughout the entirety of our communities. We see it in our streets, we see it in our parks, we see it in our grocery stores. Frankly, we see it almost everywhere. In addition to the campaign commitments around the crimes of obstruction and intimidation, we are moving forward with establishing a new crime of hate. This will operate by layering on top of existing criminal offences with a new offence that will specifically target hate where that crime was committed because of their motivation of hatred towards the victim. You can imagine that it may be more morally culpable for a person who assaults another, not just because of a personal problem they may have, but because of their belonging to a community. If a person robs a store because the owner comes from a particular group, or if a person commits harassment against someone who is seeking to attend university classes merely because they belong to a particular community of faith or race. This behavior is not just morally culpable. The impact has reverberations through the entirety of a community, and I would argue tears at the seams of the social fabric of the nation. Pour contrer la montée de la haine, notre gouvernement a déposé aujourd'hui à la Chambre un projet de loi qui modifie le code criminel pour protéger l'accès aux lieux de culte, écoles et centres communautaires, sanctionner les crimes motivés par la haine, interdire l'affichage public de certains symboles terroristes ou haine lorsqu'il est fait volontairement pour promouvoir la haine contre un groupe identifiable et clarifier un droit à la définition de la haine. In addition to the crimes of obstruction, intimidation, and hate, we are also moving forward with an additional offense of the willful promotion of hate through the use of hate symbols. Specifically enumerated will be particular symbols associated with a period of history involving Nazis' discrimination against Jews and the targeting of Jews in the Holocaust, as well as the symbols specifically tied to listed terror organizations. In addition to these new offenses, we are taking certain steps that will make it easier for law enforcement to take action. This comes directly from feedback that we've had with conversations with law enforcement over the course of the summer, including adding a definition of hatred to the criminal code, which codifies the test laid out by the Supreme Court of Canada, as well as removing the requirement of the consent of a provincial attorney general in order to prosecute a crime of hate. This is important to allow police to do their job when they see hate in our communities. By way of conclusion, we cannot ignore hate in our communities and expect that it will not fester. If we do not take action, we will be responsible for the hate that will continue to impact communities across this country. I should mention as well that there are many behaviors that are despicable in this country, that are characterized by hatred towards another, that may not reach a criminal threshold. It is important that we do not fail one another, as we have in too many instances in the past. When you see hate in your community, we have a responsibility to address it. It is my view that we are responsible in the end, not only for the acts that we commit, but for the instances where we see an injustice and choose to stand idly by. Folks, we owe a duty to our neighbors to be good neighbors. It's a very Canadian value, and I hope that we can all exercise it in our daily lives. Merci tout le monde. C'est un plaisir d'être ici. I'll take your questions.
D'abord, on n'a pas vu le projet de loi. Les journalistes n'ont pas eu accès encore. Donc, c'est difficile pour nous de vous poser des questions en toute connaissance de cause. Cela étant dit, quelles sont les provisions concernant les zones tampons, de bubble zones,
ouais.
Et est-ce que ça ne contrevient pas à la liberté d'expression et de manifester de certaines personnes?
Alors, merci pour ces questions très importantes. Il est essentiel pour protéger les droits d'expression qui est dans la charte. Ce n'est pas possible pour le gouvernement d'éviter ces droits très importants. Le projet de loi incluant les langues spécifiques pour adresser les droits pour la personne de continuer d'avoir les droits d'expression. Il est essentiel, selon moi. C'est important aussi pour comprendre les pouvoirs du gouvernement fédéral. En particulier, nous n'avons pas le pouvoir pour adresser juste l'espace avec une bubble zone pour utiliser votre langue, parce qu'il y a un enjeu pour les provinces et les municipalités. Je veux envoyer une lettre de la Fédération canadienne de municipalités pour adresser ce concern. Mais nous avons le pouvoir pour adresser des actes criminels. Quand nous avons ces pouvoirs, nous avons une obligation pour adresser ces actes criminels qui est présent dans nos communautés. Just pour clarifier, je parle en anglais. I think this is one of the most important questions that we need to clarify. Canadians have the right to free expression. This bill goes to great lengths to specifically protect the ability of Canadians to take part in peaceful protests and to freely express themselves in a nonviolent way. In addition to the obvious charter rights which bind the government, we have included specific language to exempt peaceful protests and to make clear that Canadians who seek to communicate information continue to be free to do so. It's important as well for Canadians to understand that there are different levels of government that may have something to say in this conversation. When it comes to the issue of bubble zones, it is for municipalities to regulate what behavior may take place near a specific building. We don't have the same authorities to regulate behavior in a space in general terms. However, we do have the opportunity to legislate new criminal offenses where the behavior crosses a level of moral culpability beyond that criminal threshold. This legislation represents implements those new offences in a criminal context, while absolutely taking great pains to respect the essential right of Canadians to express themselves in a democracy.
So just to be clear, in that bill that nobody here has seen, there's nothing about bubble zones.
No, it's a different approach. There are offences on obstruction, intimidation. I will be sending a letter to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, informing them of the steps that we've taken and pointing out where municipalities may be able to take action in addition to the measures that fall within areas of federal jurisdiction.
I'm hoping you can clarify a bit on the changes to the willful promotion of hate through hate symbols and terrorist symbols being displayed in public. Would that cover something like a Nazi flag being waved by a protester in downtown Ottawa, or a flag waved by that has symbols belonging to Hamas or Hezbollah in a protest in, say, downtown Toronto?
Look, a very important question, and I think you'll appreciate that when you're dealing with a scenario where police may lay charges and Crowns may choose to prosecute, it is an extremely fact-dependent analysis that will depend heavily on the very specifics that happen in a given instance. The key here, though, is that it's not a blanket ban on particular symbols. It is a new offence that deals with the willful promotion of hate through the use of those symbols. We have in other portions of the criminal code examples where similar kinds of approaches have been taken because willful promotion of hatred certainly is a crime now. I would liken it to the example of having both the charge of assault and assault with a weapon. Sometimes the tool that you use can increase the harm to the victim and to the community. If the view of law enforcement and of Crown prosecutors is that there was an attempt to willfully promote hate against an identifiable group through the use of those hate symbols, that is a scenario where this new charge would have application.
Can you give an example? Because I think a lot of Canadians would see this in the context of some of the protests we've seen in this country over the past number of years. But you're saying that would still be dependent on the circumstances that police would have to determine. So what is a circumstance where this charge would come into effect?
So it's difficult for me to engage on a hypothetical basis because the facts of a given scenario may be very different. Clearly, if someone is using these symbols for an academic or journalistic purpose, but not to promote hate, that is not the kind of behavior that we're targeting. Merely displaying this symbol in and of itself is not the sole harm we're trying to target. It does have to be tied with the willful promotion of hatred. This is difficult because it could take 1,000 different forms, and it's going to be for police on the ground and Crown prosecutors to identify when that threshold has been crossed. So I hesitate to get into hypotheticals absent the facts that may play out on the ground.
How do you ensure law enforcement is applying this law in a way that's fair and not informed by someone's own pre-existing bias?
So we can set what the criminal law is. Of course, enforcement on the ground will fall to the local jurisdiction, typically with policing organizations who answer to provincial governments or to municipalities. That said, there are national organizations, some of whom I've met with, actually deliver training specifically to recognize hate when they see it in their communities. Working with national organizations who have the capacity to train law enforcement, working with law enforcement with themselves, is something that will certainly remain open to. But when it comes to having the capacity to actually deliver that enforcement, this will certainly engage many areas of provincial responsibility as well. It's not lost on me that we are in new territory, and sometimes there may be a learning curve with the adoption of these new laws. So we're going to work alongside our provincial counterparts and with law enforcement to ensure that they have the tools that they need. But for clarity, I have heard directly and personally from law enforcement asking for clarity when it comes to a definition of hatred, because this is already a challenge. Asking to, in some instances, deal with the issue of the requirement that they need to go through the provincial attorney general's office to lay a charge. This is going to allow law enforcement to act more nimbly and at the same time give them more clarity than existed before to address the very problem you've raised, which exists in our communities today.
Canadians might assume flying a swastika in this country is already illegal and already covered by hate provisions. Can you explain what's going on here to make it
Certainly. So it may not necessarily be. Now, there are a series of different hate crimes that exist in this country, including the incitement of hatred, the willful promotion of hatred, the willful promotion of anti-Semitism. There are a series of crimes that touch on this, some of which have been litigated before the Supreme Court of Canada before. However, there has never been a standalone provision that deals specifically with these symbols. What we see now is an opportunity to make very clear that if you're committing the offense of the willful promotion of hatred, but you're also using the symbol of a known terrorist organization or the other symbols that are enumerated, we treat that as a more serious offense because the harm that a community may suffer when they are being intimidated with these symbols, which absolutely mean something to the affected communities, may be greater than the willful promotion of hatred in general terms.
Why wasn't, many of the things in this bill weren't in the platform, except for the part about obstruction and intimidation of places of worship. Why wasn't that in the party's platform? Shouldn't Canadians have had the chance to understand that this is something your government intends to do and get to vote with that in mind?
First, thank you very much for raising this question, and I think it's the starting point for me is that we wanted to make good on the campaign commitments around the offences of obstruction and intimidation. When I began to dig into the issue, I realized through my conversations and study that there are other opportunities to combat hate more broadly in this country. And given the opportunity to address hate, I don't want to miss it. I want to thank in particular members of the Justice Committee for the recommendations that they put forward on a study that related to some of these issues in the previous Parliament. But at the same time, when I spoke with communities who were impacted by hate, they told me that hate doesn't just exist in proximity to our religious institutions. It's cold comfort to someone who may be assaulted at a grocery store, that they may not be obstructed going to their place of worship. It's difficult for someone who is targeted with violent crime because of the community to which they belong to know that they may be free from intimidation in one part of their community but not another. We went through great pains to understand the lived experience of the communities who are suffering at the hands of those who would commit acts of hate and to ensure that we have protections for them everywhere in their community. This is where the new offense of a standalone crime of hate, layered on top of existing criminal behavior that is motivated by the hatred towards a specific group, recognizes that the impact of that criminal behavior is felt far beyond the individual victim, but by the entire community. This is an opportunity to combat hate, which has been on the rise in Canada, and just because we included some but not all of these measures in the campaign platform, did not justify to me doing less than what the circumstances demand.
Are you not concerned at all about the precedent that you're setting with the ban on the terror symbols? I understand that when you designate terror groups, that's with the advice of national security and that kind of stuff, but it is a political decision at the end of the day. The minister has to make that decision. We're seeing right now in the US where President Trump just decided that Antifa as an idea as a terrorist organization. Are you not allowing future governments to just declare any group a terrorist group and then therefore you're now not allowed to fly their symbols or whatever?
This touches on a larger issue, and that's the issue of faith in our institutions. My own view when it comes to the process that the Government of Canada has in place across previous Conservative and Liberal governments is that we actually have an independent process led by the national security apparatus that has objective criteria that informs whether an individual group will be listed. One of the things that keeps me up at night is that I don't fear that Canada will somehow suffer its downfall at the hands of a dictator on the other side of the world. I fear that the threat is far closer to home. It will be some future government empowered by an erosion of our rights today and empowered by an erosion of our institutions today. I am so proud to be Canadian because I believe that we have respect for our institutions. I believe that there is a cross-party consensus in most instances that we have a duty, particularly when it comes to national security decisions, to listen to the experts and to respect their independent advice. So my fear in Canada would be far less than you may see in other parts of the world. This is something that we should jealously guard as Canadians because in other parts of the world the harm that you've raised is a very realistic concern. To the extent that parliamentarians have concerns about these kinds of issues, I would invite them to bring experts experts before committee to study the issue in detail, hear about what risks and opportunities there are to make reasonable amendments to the bill. However, for now, I'm satisfied that based on the independence of the institutions that make decisions around the listing of terror organizations in this country, that we will protect against the very harm that you've raised.
Seeing the bill so far, sir, can you outline how long people would see jail time if they were convicted of these offenses?
There's a bit of nuance. I'd point you to the bill itself, which obviously is public now. The reason that I don't want to rhyme off a lengthy list is because there's quite a bit of nuance with respect to the different offenses. Not only different penalties for each specific offense, but when you actually look at the crime of hate, one of the strategies that we've adopted is to ensure that the severity of the punishment scales with the severity of the underlying criminal offense. So for a criminal offense that has a smaller penalty, there would be similarly a smaller penalty associated with the crime of hate, but for the most serious offenses with longer penalties, there would similarly be longer penalties. So there will be multiple sentencing guidelines baked into the bill based on the nature of the offenses, but we can have that for you in writing after this press
I
conference.
just want to clarify, based on the questions that Steph had before, can you explain why your government has not outlined what specific symbols of hate would be in this situation? We see countries like Australia, where if you have a Nazi salute, there is a set amount of jail time associated with doing actions like that or flying certain symbols there. Why have you not done that and clarified what those are?
Yeah, so that is in the bill. I only didn't want to rhyme out 8 to 10 different sentencing schemes.
None of us have read it here.
Sure, look, it's public now. I can look it up for you, but I'd suggest perhaps maybe immediately when we finish the press conference, we can give you the paper itself.
The point of accountability is to be able to ask you questions, having seen what your government is putting forward. So sending us a way to look at something while you're standing on stage taking questions about it doesn't help.
Okay, so sorry, what is there a question?
Can you tell us what they are?
Oh yeah, you want to know each of the different sentencing guidelines?
That'd be nice.
Yeah, sure. So let me flip open to the specific page. What's that? Oh, just on symbols. Yeah, so I think we're dealing with a two-year penalty. So, sorry, I'm looking at different things. Let me deal with the hate penalty first. So if you're found guilty of an indictable offense, a maximum penalty under the hate crime, it will be 5 years. If the maximum term of imprisonment for the included offense is 2 years or more, but less than 5 years. 10 years if the maximum term of imprisonment is included offense is 5 years or more, but less than 10 years. 14 years if the maximum term of imprisonment is the included offense is 10 years or more, but less than 14 years. And life if the maximum term of imprisonment for the included offense is 14 years or more, and up to imprisonment for life. Intimidation, where are we here? Would be, if you're guilty of an indictable offense, you'd be liable to imprisonment for a term of not more than 10 years. I've now skipped past the hate symbols piece. My apologies. For the punishment, everyone who commits an offense under the relevant section is guilty of an indictable offense and liable to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 2 years, or is guilty of an offense punishable on summary conviction, where there'd obviously be discretion in the circumstances. What's that? Oh, the symbols. Oh, I thought you were just looking for the sentences. Yeah, yes, yeah, certainly. So the specific symbols will be the Nazi Hakenkreuz, commonly known as the swastika, and the Nazi double sigrun, also known as the SS bolts, and the symbols of formally designated terror entities, as well as images that would be reasonably confused for those entities to protect against the possibility of counterfeits to avoid the application of law.
What do you mean by reasonably confused? Because concerns we're hearing from some Muslim groups is that like a Palestinian flag could be flown outside during a protest, and a police officer might confuse that for Hamas's flag.
Yeah, look, thank you, and that is such an important clarification. So when we are dealing with a terror organization that has a specific symbol, we would be targeting that. But when I say reasonably confused, what we're trying to target is someone who would tinker with an image slightly to make the argument that in fact it's not the symbol, when in fact the intent is to still promote hate through the use of the symbol that may not be observable easily in the circumstances. So this is not about to be clear, this is not about a Palestinian flag.
And how do you expect a police officer to be able to make that call in the heat of the moment?
So that's one of the reasons that we put this specific provision in. A police officer will presumably, in that moment, be able to see something that appears very much to be the terror symbol. If we want to make sure that it is, we're not asking the police officer to do an examination for counterfeit in that instance, because it would be practically impossible in many circumstances. So this specific provision is meant to assist law enforcement on the ground in that regard.
Is the location of where the terror symbol is displayed a factor here? What I'm trying to get at is, will someone walking down the street with a swastika t-shirt or a Hezbollah t-shirt or carrying a Hamas flag be guilty of an offence, or does it relate to where they're located, for example, if they were outside of a synagogue? And equally, if a police officer walked into someone's house and found they had, swastikas all over their bedroom, would that be an offence?
Just a point of clarity. These will depend upon the person's behavior and the circumstances, and law enforcement and prosecutors will need to be satisfied that they were using the symbols to willfully promote hate. You can appreciate how there would be a range of different circumstances that could impact whether in a given set of facts that the display of the symbol would be used for that purpose. Typically speaking, other hate provisions would have limitations if it's purely a private display. That would not necessarily mean that you're promoting hate. However, it's impossible to say with certainty in a hypothetical situation whether an individual has this specific motivation behind the display of hate symbols without having an opportunity to dig into the motivation that they may have for the display of the symbol in the first place.
I wanted to follow up on that. Can I just follow up? You said that intimidation is an offence. How can you guarantee that won't put a dampener on legitimate protest, which can be intimidating, it can be noisy, it can be loud, it can be, unpleasant and annoying, but where is the line between an annoying, loud protest and one that is criminally intimidating?
Well, if the purpose of your taking part in a protest is to communicate an idea, to communicate information, that is not captured by the legislation. If you're seeking to take part in democracy, share your perspective with the world and with your community, we must jealously guard the right of Canadians to do so. Where it crosses into a criminal context is when your motivation is not to share information or to communicate an idea, but instead to specifically incite fear within the person who may be attending their institution. To me, it's unreasonable and immoral to target someone on the basis of their belonging to a particular religious community, to seek to intimidate them from being able to practice their religion freely. However, if you have a political point to make, you should be comforted by the fact that political speech is amongst the most tightly protected speech in this country. So if your purpose is to share information, to take part in a peaceful protest, and to communicate an idea, this legislation does not seek to scope in that conduct, but is rather targeting conduct where the motivation is to intimidate someone from practicing their faith in a community.
J'aimerais mieux comprendre, M. Fraser, la portée et les limites de la question sur l'obstruction et l'accès aux lieux de culte. Je vous soumets un exemple concret. On a vu à Montréal un groupe, Montreal for Palestine, qui organise des rallyes, des prières devant la basilique Notre-Dame. Est-ce que ça rentre dans votre projet de loi comme une offense?
OK. C'est difficile pour associer les cas spécifiques sont tous les faits ici. Je ne suis pas un juge, mais en même temps, le but pour la législation est pour protéger l'habilité pour la personne de participer dans les activités dans l'institution religieuse, le centre des communautés, les écoles, qui est utilisé pour un groupe spécifique et identifiable. Mais en même temps, il y a des exemples quand de la haine existe dans les écoles publiques, par exemple, qui n'est pas juste pour une communauté spécifique. C'est pourquoi nous incluons aussi l'offense de la haine séparée de l'offense de l'obstruction et l'imitation. Parce qu'il y a, quand de la haine existe dans des autres circonstances en public, il est essentiel, selon moi, d'adresser ce conduct aussi. Just for clarity, and then I do need to go or I will miss my anniversary dinner, but your point is extremely important. We do seek to ensure that people can freely attend their religious institutions, community centers, schools, and other facilities that are used primarily by a identifiable group that's recognized in Canada's laws. However, when that hate takes place in a public setting, not necessarily targeting an entire class of people or a building used by a class of people, but that hate motivation still exists to target a specific person based on their belonging to a specific group, that is the reason that we wanted to include the separate charge of hate, to recognize that hate is not limited to our religious institutions or buildings, but exists everywhere, and where it exists, we want to ensure the criminal law can respond. I really must go.
Irish Band Kneecap is going to
Yes,
sue
can you-
the federal government. Can you react to that, please?
I've only just become aware of this in the minutes before I've come out to the microphone. I would point you to the appropriate department to provide an answer.
Is the actions that this band took, the things that one of them had flown a flag of Hezbollah and the band had shouted, up Hamas, up Hezbollah, is that the type of thing that you think would be criminalized under this law?
So I've only become aware through a 1-minute verbal conversation of this story. I haven't actually read it myself. I make a habit not to speak about things that I haven't taken the time to understand. I would point you to relevant departments who may be dealing with any government decisions being taken, but I would like to get fully briefed on it before I offer commentary in public. I do go.
What we've heard today is that someone can slap on a Nazi t-shirt or a Hezbollah t-shirt and walk down the street, and unless police decide on the circumstances, their motivation, that's still going to be legal under this law.
So I do need to go. I've mentioned it a number of times. All of these cases will be fact specific in every instance. That is true of hate crimes that exist today. That will be true of not just hate crimes, but all crimes going forward. I think it's dangerous for me in a hypothetical context to start projecting on what behavior may specifically be included in the absence of a full understanding of the facts. What we're trying to target with these hate symbols is when an individual is willfully promoting hate against an identifiable group in Canada, and they're using known hate symbols to do it. We want that to attract criminal law scrutiny. Thank you very much, everyone. Merci tout le monde. And I do hate to run, everyone. We will see you soon, and I try not to run away from you guys.